I woke that morning to the faint smell of roses and sandalwood drifting through our bedroom. For a moment, half asleep, I thought it was the usual scent of my own cologne, the one I'd been wearing for years. But as I inhaled again, I realized something was off. This fragrance was lighter, softer, definitely not mine. My wife, Cecily, was standing by the open window in her bathrobe, applying a perfume I didn't recognize. A slight breeze stirred the curtains, carrying that unfamiliar scent toward me. I rose on my elbow, perplexed. "New perfume?" I asked, voice groggy. She turned, gave a small nod, and started to smile, but then her expression grew guarded, as though she'd just remembered something. "Yeah," she said, pulling the robe tie tighter. "I picked it up last weekend." "Where?" "Oh, just at a little boutique in the mall," she said vaguely, turning back toward the window. Sunlight caught the edges of her hair, making it gleam. Something about her posture felt different, rigid, as though she were afraid to face me. I wondered if she was simply preoccupied with her day's tasks. But the air between us felt heavy. I pushed myself out of bed, my feet meeting the cold floor. "Well, it smells nice," I offered. "Different from your usual brand." She nodded without meeting my eyes. "Wanted a change, I guess." I let it go for the moment, rummaging for clothes. My schedule was busy, and I didn't want to fixate on something that might be trivial. But the seed of curiosity was planted. Cecily had always been fairly consistent with her fragrances, warm, slightly floral notes that blended well with my own cologne. We used to joke that we smelled like a matching set. Now, though, she was wearing something that didn't quite align with that synergy. Maybe that was the point. A few hours later, as I was passing her in the hallway, I leaned in for a quick kiss. Immediately, she wrinkled her nose and turned away. "Ooh," she muttered. "That cologne again?" I pulled back, startled. "What do you mean?" "You used to love this," I said, confusion twisting in my gut. We'd first picked it out together on a whim, sampling testers at a department store. She'd practically insisted I buy it, back then. She pressed her lips together, shrugging. I don't know, it's too strong now. Gives me a headache." "But, you said it was your favorite," I replied, voice subdued. "I even used to joke it reminded you of cedar in the woods, right? Remember?" A flicker of sadness crossed her features, real sadness, or maybe guilt. "People change," she said quietly, then retreated to the living room. I stood there, hands hanging at my sides, bewildered. People change, yes, but so abruptly? I felt a pang of hurt that she now claimed to hate the cologne she once adored. More than that, it was the final piece in a puzzle. Her new perfume, her sudden aversion to mine, her occasional distance these past weeks. Something bigger was going on. Over the next few days, her distaste for my scent became almost comical. She'd wince if I walked too close, or she'd crack a window in the car, citing claustrophobia. She never used to do that. "It's really not that strong," I insisted once, fumbling with the seatbelt as she rolled the passenger window all the way down, letting the wind roar in. She just mumbled an apology, said she felt nauseous. But that same day, I caught that new perfume wafting off her at random intervals, swirling in the close air of our bedroom. No mention of who recommended it, or how she came across it. The incongruity tied my stomach in knots. Cecily and I had been married nearly 7 years, and though we'd had our share of squabbles, we prided ourselves on open communication, well, until recently. Lately, she'd grown more and more reserved. It was subtle. She'd come home from her architectural design job looking drained, barely greeting me before heading to the shower. She'd stifle any conversation about her day with a quick, "It's fine, just hectic." Our weekends, once spent exploring new cafes, had devolved into quiet nights at home, each of us lost in separate corners of the house. I told myself it was a phase, that she was exhausted from a big project. But now I wondered if something deeper was brewing. I confided my unease in my best friend, Lionel, over coffee one afternoon. "She's wearing some new perfume, hates my cologne, acts like I stink. It's petty, but it's messing with my head," I admitted. "We used to match in these little ways, you know?" She called us a scent puzzle piece. Now she's, I don't know, discarding it. Lionel sipped his latte, eyebrows arched. "Could be stress," he suggested. "Sometimes folks do random stuff when they're stressed. Or maybe she's physically reacting to something. Perfumes can cause allergies. Have you asked her directly?" I huffed. "I tried, but she just shrugs. Something's off. She's distant. She's not telling me something." Lionel gave a sympathetic nod. "Don't assume the worst. Talk to her more. Let her know you're worried. I resolved to do just that. That evening, we were sitting at the table, finishing a simple dinner. She'd seemed spaced out. Hey, I began, voice gentle, I've noticed you've been distant lately. And you suddenly can't stand my cologne. Is there something you want to tell me? Are you okay? Her eyes darted away, and for a moment, I thought she might open up. But then she gave a small, forced smile. I'm fine. Just under a lot of pressure at work. That cologne triggers my headaches now, that's all. Sorry if I've been short with you. I studied her expression, searching for sincerity. We can talk about work pressure if you want. Or we can see a doctor about your headaches. She shook her head. No, I'm dealing with it. Let's not make a fuss. Then she abruptly stood, gathering plates to the sink. I sank back in my chair, frustration coiling in my gut. Another brush off. A few nights later, I found an empty gift box in the bathroom trash, labeled Vanilla Noir and Petals. That had to be the new perfume. The brand was unknown to me, definitely not something from our usual store. The packaging looked fancy, possibly expensive. Who gave it to her? She'd implied she bought it, but the box looked like a gift set. My mind leapt to the worst scenario. Maybe someone else, some man, had given it to her. Maybe that man hated my old cologne, and she was switching to please him. The thought of it made my stomach churn. But I had no proof, just speculation. The next day, a Sunday, she left early, claiming she had to check out a construction site that was falling behind schedule. On a Sunday? I asked, suspicious. She gave a quick nod. Yes, clients are anxious. I'll be back by dinner. She rushed off, not even finishing her coffee. Once the door shut, I sank onto the couch, a swirl of dread. Enough was enough. If she was truly at a site, maybe I'd do something unorthodox, show up with lunch, see if she needed help. Or maybe I'd confirm if she was there at all. So that's exactly what I did. I hopped in my car and drove to the address she'd once mentioned for that project. It was across town, near a new office complex. I arrived, found a chain-link fence around a half-finished building, no sign of active work. The gate was locked. A quick glance told me no one was there. My heart pounded with betrayal. So she'd lied about this site visit, too. Where was she? Seething, I tried calling her phone. It went to voicemail after a few rings. I left a short message, carefully keeping my voice steady. Hey, I'm near the site. Gate's locked. Let me know if I'm at the wrong place. She never called back, just texted an hour later. Oh, sorry, I had to run to a different location. No need to bring lunch, thanks though. My blood boiled. Another vague half-truth. I typed a curt reply, okay, be safe. Inside, I was twisting with suspicion. I spent the afternoon pacing our living room, replaying every sign of her new behavior, the sudden hatred of my cologne, the new perfume she'd never credited me for, the missing hours, these bogus site visits. By the time she returned at dusk, I'd reached a boiling point. She walked in, set her purse down, greeted me softly. I stood near the window, arms folded. You said you had to check the project site, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I went by. Place was locked, no one there. Care to explain? She froze, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Then she recovered, forcing a laugh. Oh, I meant the other site, the one near West Grove. Not that one. I'm sorry, I must have confused the addresses. Her words sounded hollow. Which site in West Grove? You never mentioned that location at all. My pulse hammered. She hesitated. It's a small side project for a private client. I can't really talk about it. She tried to brush past me, heading to the kitchen, but I blocked her path, a swirl of heartbreak and anger. Cecily, stop. This is insane. You're lying, you know it. Why are you doing this? Just tell me the truth. She looked at me, tears gathering. I'm not lying, she whispered, but even as she said it, her voice trembled with unconvincing shame. I can't talk about it right now. Then she darted around me, fled to the bathroom, and locked the door. I stood there, stunned, hearing muffled sobs on the other side. Part of me wanted to break the door down, demand answers. But the vulnerability in her voice made me hesitate. I retreated to the living room, my mind whirling with painful theories. By the time she emerged, she looked exhausted, eyes puffy. We ate dinner in near silence. Later, as we settled into bed, I tried once more. Please, let me help you. If something's going on, I can handle it. But not if you keep shutting me out. She exhaled shakily, turning off the bedside lamp. I'm sorry, she whispered in the dark. I'm not ready to talk. Then she turned her back to me, feigning sleep. I lay awake, the darkness pressing in, heart pounding with heartbreak. We were drifting further apart. Over the following week, the tension at home was nearly unbearable. She insisted on sleeping on the couch a few nights, citing insomnia. Meanwhile, I found more puzzling details. A new set of clothes in her closet that I'd never seen her buy, small trinkets from places out of town. She refused to discuss any of it. The cologne fiasco continued. She'd recoil if she caught a whiff of my usual brand, urging me to wash it off. It just makes me nauseous, she insisted. I eventually stopped wearing cologne altogether, just to avoid conflict. But her new perfume lingered constantly, sweet and pervasive, reminding me of secrets I wasn't privy to. In my growing desperation, I considered extreme measures, checking her phone, rummaging through her car for receipts. But each time I approached that line, I felt a stab of guilt. We were partners, married. Shouldn't I trust her? But trust requires honesty, and she'd offered none. One afternoon, overwhelmed by anxiety, I actually picked up her phone from the counter while she was in the shower. It was locked by a new passcode. She'd changed it recently. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, before placing it back, unsettled. Another sign that she was hiding something big. Finally, about 2 weeks after the meltdown in the living room, she came home one evening, face drawn. She stood in the doorway, bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes red-rimmed. I turned from the kitchen sink, noticing tears threatening. Hey, I said quietly. What's? She set the bag down, walked up to me slowly, and wrapped her arms around me. I froze, startled. She hadn't embraced me like that in weeks. Then she started crying softly into my shoulder. I can't do this anymore, she murmured. I felt tears prick my own eyes. Do what? She pulled back slightly, looking at me with heartbreak etched in her features. Lie to you. Keep everything inside. It's killing me, killing us. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry about the cologne, about the new perfume, about the weird errands. I'll tell you everything, if you'll just promise not to hate me. My heart pounded with a mix of relief and dread. I could never hate you, I whispered. I just want the truth. She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. Then let's sit. We moved to the couch, tension thick in the air. She took a shaky breath. First. I'm not having an affair, she began, voice trembling. I know you suspect that, and I don't blame you. But that's not it. I exhaled, some relief flooding me, though I braced for more. Okay. Then what? She wrung her hands, staring at them. I've been traveling out of town, because of my father. I frowned in confusion. Her father was an older man who lived states away, they rarely communicated. Your father? I thought you said he moved to Florida? She nodded, tears welling. He did, but he's been here the past month, in a rehabilitation center. He had a stroke. My family asked me to keep it quiet because, well, he's in a legal dispute over some property. It's messy. They didn't want publicity or extra eyes on him. So my mother insisted we keep his location hush-hush, even from you. She wiped her eyes, voice thick with emotion. I didn't want to shut you out, but I promised my mother I wouldn't tell anyone. I was stuck. So I started lying about work, about site visits. I'd go see him at the rehab center near Ridgeway. That's how your cologne became an issue. My father hates that smell, it triggers migraines for him, so I avoided wearing anything that lingered. Then I started to resent your cologne by association, because each time I smelled it, it reminded me of how I was sneaking around. So I replaced it with this new perfume he actually can tolerate. He likes the smell. I gaped, speechless. So this new perfume is your father's preference? She winced. Yes. He said the old one gave him headaches, so I found something mild. It just became easier to wear it, even at home. She shook her head, tears dripping. God, it sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. My mind spun. So her father was in a secret rehab facility, and she felt compelled to hide it from me. Why keep it from me, though? Did you really think I'd blab about it? I would have supported you. She sobbed, pressing her hands to her face. I didn't know how to tell you. My mother was adamant, don't drag Toby into this. We can't risk more people knowing your father's here while the legal stuff is ongoing. I tried to stand up for you, but she was in a panic. I was torn between loyalty to you and loyalty to them. So I tried to handle it alone. I exhaled, heartbreak mingling with frustration. But lying for weeks? Telling me you hated my cologne out of nowhere, just because your father disliked it? She nodded miserably. Yes. I didn't realize how quickly it would spiral. Then the stress of seeing him in rehab, the guilt of shutting you out, it all built up. I'm so sorry. I leaned back, tears threatening to spill. The puzzle pieces finally fit. Not an affair, but a twisted family crisis. And the talk of hating my cologne, that was basically you projecting the frustrations you felt from this entire charade onto me. It hurt, Cecily. It truly hurt. Her voice broke. I know. I never meant to hurt you. I hated how it reminded me of the deception. Everything got tangled. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound her quiet weeping. Finally, I placed a hand on hers. I wish you'd trusted me, I whispered. I get that your mother was anxious, but I'm your husband. Don't I deserve to know something that big? She nodded, tears coursing down her cheeks. Yes, you do. I regret not telling you from the start. I felt cornered. Please forgive me. My anger ebbed, replaced by a surge of empathy. She'd been stuck between warring loyalties, coping with a father's medical crisis, forced to lie to protect him. I can forgive you, I said softly, but we need to rebuild trust. No more secrets. If your mother doesn't want me to know, that's too bad, I do know now. And I won't broadcast it to the world, but I can't be shut out again. She nodded vigorously. I promise. No more secrets. If you want, I'll take you to meet him, to confirm it's true. He's just up in that rehab center near Ridgeway. My mother might freak out, but you deserve the truth. I felt relief mingle with caution. Yes, I'd like that. I want to see for myself. And if the cologne triggers his headaches, fine, but be honest about it, instead of telling me you can't stand it for no reason. A watery smile touched her lips. I will. We can figure out a compromise. Maybe a different brand that doesn't set him off, or I only wear it outside his visits. I just want to come clean, Toby. In the days that followed, we navigated the awkward territory of family secrets. She eventually set up a short meeting with her father, in a quiet lounge of the rehab center. The man was frailer than I recalled from years back, when I'd met him only briefly. He looked contrite about the chaos his presence caused, apologized for the stress. I, in turn, tried to be gracious, though a part of me still felt anger at how his demands forced her to lie. The legal matter was indeed complicated, and apparently her mother was terrified it would harm the family if word got out. Regardless, I felt some relief that the puzzle was indeed real, not a cover for infidelity. Meanwhile, Cecily and I had heart-to-heart conversations about how illusions corrode a relationship. She admitted that each lie about work or seminars chipped away at her sense of security, making her resent my cologne just because it represented normalcy she felt unworthy of. She also explained how the new perfume was something her father once gifted her mother, which ironically never used to bother her until now. He'd asked her to wear it as a sign of empathy. The entire situation was emotionally messy, but I found a measure of understanding for why she latched onto it, even though it caused me pain. We also took steps to rebuild trust. She shared her phone passcode, let me see her text conversations with her mother about the father's condition. I felt guilty prying, but she insisted it was necessary for us to move past the deception. Gradually, I relaxed, seeing that indeed all her out-of-town trips aligned with visits to the rehab center. There was no hidden romantic partner, no suspicious flirtations. Just a complicated family crisis. The fiasco about the cologne gradually faded, replaced by more open communication. She still disliked the smell, partly due to negative associations, but we compromised on a milder new brand. I teased her that maybe we'd find a shared fragrance we both love again someday. She smiled, promising that next time, we'd pick it out together. For me, the heartbreak was real, the betrayal of trust stung deeply. Yet in the end, we learned a valuable lesson about illusions and secrecy. If she'd told me from the start that her father was in a local rehab, I might have objected to her mother's demand for silence, but I would have respected her wish for privacy. We could have handled it as a team, preventing weeks of suspicion and sorrow. Instead, illusions blossomed, fueled by fear and loyalty conflicts, culminating in me suspecting an affair or some other heartbreak. Despite the pain, we emerged stronger. She realized that shutting me out only amplified her stress, and I recognized that sometimes a partner's abrupt changes in behavior can stem from external pressures, not betrayal. We decided to see a marriage counselor for a few sessions, focusing on communication strategies. The counselor helped us articulate how we each felt during the deception and find ways to ensure it never repeats. Eventually, her father's legal matters wrapped up quietly, and after weeks of therapy, he improved enough to move to a less restrictive facility. We visited him together a couple of times, forging a cautious peace. Her mother eventually learned that I knew the truth, expressed mild indignation, but Cecily stood firm, saying she refused to lie to her spouse anymore. That stance, ironically, earned me a hint of respect from her mother, who realized the extent of her demands had harmed us. In the months that followed, we found ourselves closer than we'd been in a long time, ironically thanks to facing the crisis. Freed from illusions, we returned to a simpler intimacy, long talks over dinner, spontaneous walks in the park. The new perfume eventually ran out, and she chose not to buy more. Instead, she tested a few samples at the store, inviting me along. We found a gentle floral scent we both enjoyed, a small but symbolic sign of unity. Sometimes, I recall the day she insisted she suddenly hated my cologne, how that small shift sent me spiraling into suspicion. It's astonishing how illusions can breed heartbreak, and how heartbreak can lead to truth. If not for that glaring sign of her abrupt change, I might have overlooked the real cause indefinitely. She might have silently endured her family's secret. We might have drifted further apart. Now, though, we talk openly about her father's health, about any big family developments. She never hides an out-of-town trip behind a fake seminar or work crisis. That sense of honesty is precious, more so because we nearly lost it. Yes, it took a painful confrontation, nights of tears, and an avalanche of doubts to get here. But I'd rather have the raw truth than illusions that corrode our bond. She's learned the same. Illusions might protect someone short-term, but they shatter trust. And trust, once shattered, demands real effort to restore. We put in that effort. The reward is a marriage that emerged battered but unbroken, steadied by a deeper understanding. Now, on the occasional morning, she'll wander into the bedroom, pick up my mild new cologne, and spritz a tiny bit on her wrist, laughing at the reversed roles. "It's not so bad," she jokes. "No migraines, no father hang-ups." And I'll grin, pulling her close, grateful for how far we've come. The memory of her abrupt distaste for my old cologne stands as a testament to the secrets that nearly drove us apart, and the honesty that brought us back together. Sometimes, after a long day, she'll rest her head on my shoulder, sigh, and whisper, "I'm sorry for how I handled everything." I'll gently tilt her chin up, meeting her gaze. "We both learned," I say. "That's what matters." She'll nod, eyes soft, and for a moment, I'll smell the faint trace of that old perfume she used to hide from me, or maybe a new one we discovered together. Because in the end, scents come and go, illusions rise and fall, but the truth we share remains the bedrock of our life, something intangible, yet absolutely necessary for us to breathe free. And so, her abrupt hatred of my cologne and her sudden new fragrance turned out to be signals of an unspoken family crisis, rather than the hallmark of unfaithfulness. The heartbreak I felt was real, but the cause was more complicated, and more forgivable, than I'd feared. We overcame the illusions, we overcame the wedge they drove between us, and we reclaimed the closeness we once had, perhaps now tempered by a deeper sense of empathy for each other's vulnerabilities. As I watch her prepping dinner one evening, humming softly to herself, I feel a rush of gratitude that we made it through that dark patch. She catches my eye, smiles, and the warmth in that look says more than words. I step behind her, slip my arms around her waist, inhaling the gentle, shared fragrance we keep on the shelf. She sighs contentedly, leaning into me. In that moment, the illusions of the past fade into memory, replaced by the bright, honest present. And that's a scent we both can truly cherish.